We are still waiting for a few people. One of our directors is still trying to attend, but we are going to start. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Veronica. I'm an economist and consultant at the NECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And this is one of the first webinars we'll be running as part of our new platform, a new forum called the African Development Impact Forum. The forum is launching this year, the forum itself in person, which will look at building together, bringing together a multi-stakeholder approach to solution and problem solving in policy and development. So it would take together private sector, public, civil society, youth to look at the key challenges in Africa and solve it using practical ways together to try and figure out the solutions. And this year, we're looking at job creation as our key challenge in Africa. And through that, we're going to look at three different themes that are potential solutions to job creation. So today's theme, as you can see, is looking at critical minerals as a leverage for youth employment through regional value chains. And we're very lucky enough to be joined with four very key speakers, amazing expertise in their area. So we have John Marie Kanda, Chema Triki, Tabi Tabi, and Mrs. Marit Kitaw, also from UNECA. And these guys will give us their insights and their potential early solutions around what could be the opportunities and potential challenges around leveraging critical green minerals for youth employment in job creation in Africa. So I'm going to bring in our director, Karima. She's the director of EDEP, it's a French version, but it's one of our institutions that look at economic development and provides capacity building training. And she's going to bring us some introductions around African Development Impact Forum, as well as this webinar today. And then hopefully we will also get our director to come in, Director of Green Minerals, to come in and talk about the work they're doing as well. So can I pass it to you, Dr. Karima? Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MC. I'll say a few words in French since it is a bilingual seminar. Donc, bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous et bienvenue à ce webinaire, le premier d'une série qui vont nous conduire jusqu'au mois de juin. Meilleurs vœux à toutes et à tous pour la nouvelle année. Nous avons une interprétation disponible en anglais et en français. Je voulais juste vous souhaiter la bienvenue en français avant de passer à la langue anglaise pour mon mot de bienvenue. So, thank you again, MC, and welcome to all of you to this webinar on leverage Africa critical green minerals for youth employment through regional value chains. This is the first of a series that we hope will be successfully leading us towards the main forum in June. So why are we here today and why do we have this meeting? Actually, when it comes to policy making and policy implementation, sound policy implementation, all analyses show that Africa is still at a crossroads. In fact, despite decades of progress and progress in the analysis, the analytical capacity, our continent and its development ecosystem continues to be challenged by the implementation gap, by an implementation that really leads to transformation and impact on people's life. On the one hand, there is no shortage of research, diagnosis, and best practice models. Yet, all too often, these same solutions remain confined to reports and conferences, failing to translate into real and scalable solutions. And we do hope that this meeting today will not add to these reports and conferences, but will really bring us to something more concrete. All this research actually result in fragmented initiatives and what we can call missed opportunities for actual job creation, sustainable jobs, increased productivity, and inclusive transformation. That is the reason why in June 2026, our mother institution, the mother institution of IDEP, which is the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, will be launching the African Development Impact Forum, ADIF, and I will continue referring to it as ADIF. So this initiative is led and convened by ECA. It aims to move beyond merely recounting known facts about the continent's policies, strategies, and recommendations. It will be a platform where African, together with their partners, can turn ideas into actions. But we want it to be an African-led agenda. It is designed as an action-driven platform, and ADIF will turn evidence, will start with applied research and turn it into measurable impact. And apologies for my voice, I have a very bad cold actually. So ADIF will be integrated into the ECA delivery architecture and complement existing events such as ECA Conference of Ministers, which is our governing body, the African Business Forum, and the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development that on a yearly basis prepares Africa to report to the high-level policy forum that takes place every July in New York. In this context, ADIF will focus on implementation and on the how of the delivery and what would be the elements that will trigger a more impactful implementation. To ensure African ownership, selected member states will serve as thematic champions for ADIF and for ADIF 2026. They will guide the agenda, contribute to evidence, and shape priorities across regions. But ADIF is not just a forum. It is a movement, it is a concept to bridge the gap between ideas and actions, and between policy and impact. Together with all of you, we will move from dialogue to delivery and from vision to transformation. So, how will all this be done actually? First, ADIF is committed to generating action-oriented solutions for the continent. Feasible action that are aligned with Africa's vision, Africa Agenda 2063, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Pact for the Future. Second, ADIF is about connections. It will bring together policy and decision makers, the private sector, think tanks, youth network, and development partners on a practical platform. And I do hope that today we have with us a representative of those youth network, because we will be talking in 2026 about job creation and creating jobs, long-lasting, decent, and impactful jobs for Africa's youth is a real priority. So ADIF will be a collaborative space where ideas will meet execution and partnership drive impact. And thirdly, ADIF will showcase what works while focusing on the bottlenecks of what doesn't yet work in terms of policy implementation. But we will not spend our time talking about the bad news we will really focus on the good news that can be emulated and can be shared with all the participants. So across Africa, there are real models, research, and best practices on which we will be building. And they have proven to be successful. ADIF will highlight this solution and replicate them, scaling up successful approaches to accelerate progress across the continent. And finally, ADIF plans to move beyond dialogue, beyond just rhetoric. Through an implementation clock, it will support countries and partners in piloting and scaling solutions, providing technical follow-up to ensure commitments translate into measurable results. So as I said, it is about delivery, accountability, and impact. In essence, this is the core idea behind the initiative, co-creation of African ideas for development that can be translated into impactful solutions. And your participation, your guidance is critical in this regard. And before we reach June, we will be having a number of preparatory activities. And among them are the Stock Take series webinars. The forum is indeed being designed using a three-stage approach. First, we will have what we call a call to action. It will launch a challenge to identify high potential, evidence-based models that are ready for implementation and that will build what we call the pre-forum momentum. Next, we will have a policy hackathon to test and refine actionable solutions using a multi-stakeholders approach, which will be shared during the forum itself, during ADIF. And finally, we will have the implementation clock, which will track, support, and scale up the solution co-created during the forum. And this will be the post-forum momentum, and it is really key for the success of ADIF and ADIF concept. The Stocktake series webinars form part of the pre-forum engagement and comprise of 6-month virtual series showcasing evidence, mapping barriers, and surfacing implementation-ready solutions. And we are happy today to have with us really great panelists who will lead us towards the issue that we will be discussing through this webinar. So the ADIF journey begins with those webinars. Over the course of 6 months, we will convene virtual dialogues to exchange knowledge, shape priorities, and build momentum for action. These live-streamed conversations will identify what is working, address persistent barriers, and highlight solutions that are ready for implementation. By crowdsourcing evidence and perspective from across sectors and regions, the intent is that these webinars will create a shared knowledge base that will ensure the forum agenda is fully inclusive and grounded in existing challenges and pragmatic solutions. As Veronica said, the launch of ADIF will start this year with a reflection on best practices and innovative solutions for job creation in the continent. Being one of, not to say the youngest region of the world, it is important that we have solutions for our youth and for our youth employment. The continent must create 15 million jobs every year to meet the aspiration of its youth. There are over 420 million young people between 15 and 35 years old. So job creation is not keeping pace for this youth, and a number of them are left behind. So, and despite this demographic dividend, youth employment remains alarmingly high. So this is not just a statistic, it is a real call to action. And we must transform the challenge of job creation into an opportunity by unlocking sectors that drive productivity, innovation, and inclusive growth. The main theme of this first edition, critical green minerals, is a key sector for creating the green economy that we are calling for. And we do hope that through the presentation of our four panelists, and more importantly, through the dialogue we will have with you, we will come up with ideas that will shape this part of the forum agenda so that during the forum in June, we will be able to bring more impactful ideas to the participants so that afterwards we will be able, through the implementation clock, to focus on very impactful activities, joint activities in a co-creation approach. So, Veronica and dear participants, these were a few words about where we are coming from, why we want really to focus on pragmatic ideas, tangible results. And I do hope that with this first webinar, we will be able to move very successfully towards the implementation of ADIF and all its components. Over to you, MC.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karima, for such an incredible introduction into the African Development Impact Forum, which we say is ADIF, for those of you just came in. And just to kind of repeat what she said, so it's a new platform led by EDEP and UNECA to look for tangible solutions to the key challenges in Africa. And these solutions have to be actionable based. So not the type, as Dr. Karima mentioned, where we just write and put it on the shelf, the type that we can actually look at how policy implementation takes place. So very excited. You are the first guest to attend this three-stage engagement as ADIF. I would like to bring in the Director of Critical Minerals and Green Development in UNECA, Director Cosmas. I think he'll be attending through a different camera. Can you hear us, Cosmas? So
Yes.
Cosmas will be introducing the topic of the forum today and why it's important for us to discuss this and the aspect of job creation in Africa, as well as solutions that come from that. Over to you, Cosmas.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Veronica, and thank you, Karima. Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, and partners. Thank you very much for making time for this first webinar. I will be very brief because Karima has introduced the ADIF forum. Just to reiterate that we are using the opportunity of ADIF to challenge ourselves and our partners to harness the research and evidence that we produce, the practices that some of you execute. We are trying to challenge ourselves to see if we can harness all of those things to accelerate structural transformation within the African continent. And for our first webinar today, we are keen to explore how we may harness Africa's critical minerals to address the problem of youth unemployment, as Karima has very ably introduced. It's a forum where we are keen, again, I repeat, to challenge ourselves, think a little bit outside the box, and do things a little differently. So we are keen to hear from you, ways through which some of you are already taking efforts to harness critical minerals to help create employment or ideas that you think are critical to harnessing Africa's critical minerals to support employment creation, especially for our youth. So harnessing critical minerals. I think I will pose some questions to you just to challenge us so that we can catalyze policy imagination and institutional innovation. Reviews what's been lacking in this space. So when we talk about critical minerals, I think we all assume we know what that means, but do we really? Critical to whom and for what purpose? So critical minerals is criticality, mineral criticality is actually a dynamic and in some ways a subjective concept. The so-called legacy minerals today were critical minerals at some point in the past. The US definition of critical minerals for the first time was actually outlined in 1939, and the minerals that they identified as critical to the US then are very different from the US definition of critical minerals in the 1980s and the US definition of critical minerals in 2008. So when we talk about harnessing African critical minerals to help create youth employment, we must start from conceptualizing the criticality of minerals within the African context. Are they really critical to us and to our own purpose? If we look at our positioning in terms of, say, human capital development or infrastructure development, for example, would we get a sense from investments there or policy initiatives there that would suggest that certain minerals that Africa is endowed with are actually critical to us? So it's not the natural resource endowment itself, which is a problem for us. That has never been a problem for us. It's the way in which we harness those resources. It's who has been harnessing those resources that has always been a problem. And the challenge we have is how do we do this differently in this context in which some countries, including our own countries, have identified some of the minerals that are richly endowed within the continent as critical to the green transition. The African Green Mineral Strategy the questions I've been posing. So it focuses not just on the mining itself, because mining by itself does not really generate meaningful jobs at scale, but it focuses on things like processing, looking at the entire mineral value chain. It focuses on building human capital and skills. It focuses on domestic linkages between the mining sector and other sectors of the economy. That much we know. How do we actually get to do that? How do we harness the African continental free trade area to create the regional value chains to the harnessing of the so-called critical minerals? Some of you have been working in this area for some time, so you have some ideas. Some of you have actually been implementing initiatives in these areas, and you have some experiences. We are very keen to hear from you on how we can harness the ideas, how we can harness some of the practices so that we can scale this up and truly utilize the vast natural resource endowment that Africa has to address, as Karima says, a fundamental development challenge, which is the youth void that we have within the continent. With that, I'll hand over to the moderator. Thank you again for joining us. We're looking forward to your ideas and to working with you going forward to find practical solutions for harnessing these resources to create jobs for the African youth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Cosmas. So now that we've come accustomed to what ADIF is and what the topic is today, I'd like to give you just a quick structure of the webinar from now to the end. So we'll have a presentation from Marit, who's one of our colleagues working on this area. Just a quick evidence presentation looking at current situation on critical minerals and the opportunities in terms of development and job creation. And then we'll have a panel discussion with our three panelists, as I mentioned, before we then close up with a Q&A at the end, where we give you a chance to ask your questions and provide some of the early solutions that we've discussed. So before due, can I bring in Marit, who will give us a presentation on the current situation on critical minerals evidence. Thanks, Marit.
Yes, thank you very much, Veronica, and thank you for both directors for making the opening remarks. Can I have my presentation up, please? We look forward to the discussion, so I will not be very long in presenting. I hope my presentation will be up. Okay, thank you so much. So this topic is very, very important, as highlighted by both directors, because we talk about these green minerals with these critical minerals, but are we linking it to jobs? Is it really something that is game changer for our continent? And so I'm very happy that this is about the youth. It's about how within the value chains and where value really is created for jobs and elsewhere. So can we please go to the next slide? So the first question is why does it matter now? Why now? It was alluded to the surge in the demand for these minerals because of the decarbonization agenda. Can we move the slides, please, because it's not moving? Can we have the next slide? Or I can just talk over them, but...
They are moving, Marit. You don't... I'm on slide 3 now. The core challenge.
They're not moving from my side. I don't know
they're not showing. They're not showing on our side.
They are not showing. We are still on one, and it is not on the slide.
Yeah, it's can you put on, yes, put it on slide mode maybe. And then, yeah, so why critical minerals matter now? Because of the global demand. Now we are seeing, just put it on screen. It's not fully there. So yeah, why the demand for these green minerals is increasing because of the clean energy scenarios that are there. You know, when a decarbonization agenda, you need all these minerals for not only for electric vehicle batteries, but for solar panels, for wind turbines, for all of these renewable energy technologies. And why is it important now is because Africa has them. DRC has more than 70% of cobalt, which is one of the critical green minerals, 46% of manganese reserves we have in Africa. And let's talk about copper, bauxite, graphite, chromite, phosphate, all of them. That's why this is the evidence why it's important for us to talk about this now, is because Africa is structurally central to the global energy transition and should not be just a peripheral supplier. Next slide, please. And I wish we could have the full screen because, you know, I think it's important to showcase some of the evidence, but it's fine. So what is the real challenge is that we're not really capturing the value that we should be capturing. We've been talking about mining for hundreds of years in Africa, but really, are we benefiting from it? Especially, is it transforming lives and creating jobs for of youth that we were talking about? So value addition is largely been done outside of the continent. Only 2% of Africa's minerals are traded within Africa. And mining is very capital intensive. This is the mining part. The one that is about extraction and exploration is very capital intensive. And it's really, it generates limited direct employment. So we really have to look at it from the value chain perspective and look at the processing, the manufacturing, and the others that come within. And because that has the potential to create approximately 24 billion in annual GDP and between 2 to 2.3 million jobs by mid-2030 if things are done correctly. So the evidence message is Africa's employment gap is not due to the lack of minerals, but to the lack of value addition and climbing through the value chains. Next slide, please. So what are the, let's see where the jobs are. They're in midstream and downstream value chains, right? They're not in the mining, in the exploration and extraction, but they are in the value chain. So which segments are rich? Processing and refining, battery precursor and component manufacturing, and also new jobs that are coming up on the recycling, circular economy activities, which are down there. And also the most jobs are from the logistics, the quality assurance, the maintenance, the digital, the traceability, all of these that are created around the mines and that can be really captured within locally instead of just when you ship raw materials, you don't capture all these elements around the mines. So these are the segments that are more labor intensive and skills intensive. That's why it's important to have skills. And the evidence message here is that youth employment potential lies in systems and not in extraction alone. And for that, of course, if you really want to be have those jobs, you need the skills. Yes, go ahead, please, the next, please. You need the skills. And there's a big skills gap in Africa. What are the skills needed? Because Africa's skill system remains poorly aligned with the needs of the green minerals value chain. The critical gaps exist in industry-linked TVET, that these are technical vocational education training, metallurgy, material science, geology, digital automation, quality control, but also entrepreneurship and industrial management. There are also so many new skills, that are coming within this value chain, whether it's digital, whether it's the AI or automation, all of these, the new kind of skills, and a modernized TVET, and also about science, technology, and engineering and math education are important. And university and industry can rapidly expand youth absorption in these midstream and downstream activities. And so this is why it's important to listen to Prof. Kanda, who's hopefully will be connected, who is about the skills, and also about the industrial and midstream from Chema, and Tabi also from the entrepreneur side, later on, what kind of jobs can be captured. So skills are the binding constraint between mineral potential and youth employment. Otherwise, it just becomes aspiration. Next slide, please. And so the other issue about when you talk about mining, especially in Africa, is most of it is artisanal small-scale mining, and also it's really about, there's gap there's inclusion. It's very the disconnect sometimes from the realities of the artisanal small-scale miners. And when you talk about these big companies, mining companies that are coming to explore, so we really need to have inclusion and equity risks. So women, youth, artisanal small-scale miners remain largely excluded from higher value segments of the value chain. They always, most of the time, remain on the very first one. So although ASM employs millions across Africa, it is often informal, low income, disconnected from value chain. So it's really upon us. And once we talk about job creation, is we think about also those artisanal small scale mining, those women in mining, and they need to be formalized, upgraded, integrated into income, safety, and inclusion. And also they need skills that, like the others, they need skills, they need empowerment, so that they are also capture the value throughout the value chain. So message is a just transition requires deliberate inclusion, not trickle down effect, not think that it will happen automatically. It will not happen. So we really need to have deliberate policies and inclusion strategies for those. And next slide, please. And just to why regional value chain matter is that, if you are a single country in Africa trying to do all of these things, you will not succeed unless there is regional collaboration. And no country can do it alone. Not even the DRC, which has most of the minerals, but without collaborating with others and creating value chains like corridors. These are potential corridors, by the way. They don't exist yet. These are potential corridors that exist. That's when you can really create value regionally. So the director mentioned, next slide, please, the Africa Green Mineral Strategy. I want to go faster now. We do have an African Green Mineral Strategy, which was adopted in 2025, last year in February. And he was talking about the difference between green minerals and critical to whom, and we try to address that in that strategy. Clearly, we have a definition for green minerals in Africa. It says they are feedstock into clean energy technologies, green industries, and into mining supply chain, and equitable industrialization to serve Africa's needs. We do not go into the defense industry. We do go to the industrial, to the technology, but we do not go there. That's why we are clearly saying there are supplies to industrialization and to technologies, so that we don't go bogged down. So we do have a clear, defined green minerals. There are 15. I'm not going to go into details here, but we have a strategy. We have 4 pillars: advancing minerals development, developing technology and people, building key value chains, and mineral stewardship. Let's go to the other slide, because it gives you a snapshot. Because green mineral strategy comes with a decarbonization agenda happening. There's a rising global demand for energy transition. Then we need Africa's green minerals, and then we have those 4 pillars. And then if you can see comes from the Africa Mining Vision, which was adopted 17 now. This year it's 17 years since 2009. Which already showed us, what we need to do. But now we are going into the action. And with this decarbonization agenda, we have all those pillars. And we will using this not only just to industrialize, but also to energize, because 600 million people in Africa are still in the dark. So we are trying to have those dual energizing and industrialization and prosperity of Africa using those minerals. So next slide is about the AfCFTA, because like I said, if you do not have this continental free trade agreements, if you do not have regional collaboration, all of these will still remain pipe dreams, because the Africa Continental Free Trade Area gives us an element, it eliminates barriers to trade, eventually, and it will significantly boost intra-Africa. If there is a battery plant in the DRC, not everyone has to have a plant. They can have other regional corridors, or think about regionally about where their comparative advantages, or how they can, it can really be scaled up. So AfCFTA provides the frameworks for regional specialization, economies of scale, increase intra-Africa trade in processed minerals, because right now, even in Africa, we are still exchanging just raw. Even the 2% that we are trading is not in higher value trade. So youth employment at scales requires regional, not fragmented industrial strategies. And the final one is that, just to recap, because I've said it all, that I'm hoping that the discussions will follow these lines. So the last slide will be just to sum up what is, Africa's critical green minerals can support millions of decent jobs, but we have to shift from extraction to value addition, invest in skills and innovation, embed inclusion, and coordinate regionally under the Africa Green Mineral Strategy and the African Continental Free Trade Area. So I really look forward to the discussions, and hopefully we'll have something practical to take along. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Marit. That was very, very succulent, but also very interesting. Lots of little amazing evidence that we could really use for the discussion, and really clear to the point in terms of what we're trying to focus. Thank you so much. So before I bring in the speakers, I would like just to kind of bring it together. So as you can see, the idea here is that we've looked at the opportunities in critical minerals and green minerals and defining that, and to see where we can use opportunity to solve our biggest challenges, which, as we said, one of that is job creation in Africa. It's a key challenge. However, we can see that we have the evidence, we also have strategies, and we also have frameworks, we have the XTA, we have the opportunities, but why isn't it that we're not doing it? So the African Development Impact Forum, ADIF, is trying to get this to look at what is the implementation gap, using all the different stakeholders we mentioned. So using private sector participants, using government from their knowledge, using civil society, as well as youth, as well as donors and the community and so on. So before I start, go on ahead, let me just bring in the first speaker. So can I bring in Dr. John Marie Kanda? I don't know if he was able to join. I hadn't seen. He has. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. John Marie. And thank you so much for giving your time for this great discussion. So I would love to give you the space to introduce yourself as well, but maybe I'll just start the first question, and then when you respond to that question, you can also just introduce yourself to your great expertise and experience. So just the first question, Dr. Marie, as you come in, Africa is obviously shifting now from raw materials to more midstream and downstream, and trying to target areas such as battery precursors and recycling. So what concrete reforms are needed in universities, research institutions, and TVET institutions to align skills with these industries that they're sort of maneuvering towards, particularly in the way that support the regional value chains under the AFCFTA? Thank you. Come in, Dr. John Marie.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you. Sorry for my late into the meeting because I'm in Riyadh for the Future Mineral Forum, and it was more difficult for me to join the meeting more early. Indeed, thank you, Marit, for your presentation, and thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Indeed, Africa has grasped the need to move beyond simply extracting, I can say, and exporting raw materials, resources, to transforming them into the semi-finished product and finished product. And if we consider the case of mineral, those are necessary for energy transition, as we call it in Africa, green minerals, particularly for battery technology, of which Africa possesses vast resources. I can say Africa policies envision refining and manufacturing the battery precursor and recycling and the end of life of batteries. These activities involve the acquisition of new skills and the updating of current knowledge, which is only possible through training that needs the needs of future industries. And moreover, the technology used in the battery industries, especially at the African level, education in science and technology field must be updated to them to produce and to build competencies, workforce that is the truly ready for employment. As the African Center of Excellence of Batteries creates in DRC, we need some reforms, and that reforms must consist of introducing a new field of study at the university level, such as battery engineering, chemical and physical process engineering, automation, mechatronics, etc. increase access to practical training. And as you know, if you don't have a training internship in industries at the national and international levels, or as Marit said in the presentation, for the TVET, it will be more difficult for our young people to uh, to build more new competencies, and it will be more difficult for them to have access to the new technology and to can capture, I can say, jobs in the new industries. So for me, we need to align the curricula with the competencies needed for the, I can say, precursor industries or raffinery industries, or I can say battery technology. If we can align the curricula and the competencies needed, and then we can develop the job description, it will be good for our young people to go at the university or at the secondary school with the idea with which can be the jobs for the next 3 years or 5 years. And if it can be aligned with the curricula and the competencies needed, that will be a good thing. That my first part of the response, if I can take long, and apologize for my poor English. I'm better in Swahili
No,
and in French.
it's that's perfect. No, no, that was perfect. Absolutely, I understood you about aligning skills with the needs of the industry and making sure curriculum is reflecting. No, I completely understand you. But just to say, doctor, we have translators. So if you do feel comfortable speaking in French, that's also fine. I'll ask in English and you can respond in French, and
No problem.
participants will still be able to understand. So just the second question to follow up. So just drawing from your experience with the African Center of Excellence for Batteries and National Advisory Work, how can centers of excellence practically drive youth employment, innovation, and then also formalize the ASAM sector, the sort of the informal sector, to make sure that at least women and other types of groups are able to get into higher value traceable supply chains? And yeah, please feel free to answer in French.
OK, thank you and merci beaucoup. À cette question, je vais donc dire que le Centre africain d'excellence pour les batteries a pour mission de faire de la formation, de la recherche et de l'innovation dans les sciences ou les technologies relatives à la batterie, aux véhicules électriques. Et nous travaillons à former les jeunes gens dans les différents métiers qui sont avant l'industrie de la batterie, donc de la géologie à l'exploitation des minerais, et après au niveau du raffinage et de la fabrication des précurseurs, et nous le faisons. L'installation de matériel, la maintenance, le reconditionnement, le recyclage des batteries, etc. Mais il faut nécessairement, je l'insiste, je l'ai dit dans la première partie, il faut nécessairement des laboratoires et il faut nécessairement faire du training dans des industries. Or, cela n'existe pas. Nous, on a eu la chance avec les chercheurs du centre africain d'être envoyés à Northvolt avant que Northvolt ne ferme. Donc, ils ont passé en Norvège et en Suède du temps pour cela. Alors, en ce qui concerne le secteur informel, le secteur de l'artisanat minier, l'industrie voudrait, non, le centre africain collabore avec des structures qui sont en charge de formaliser le secteur, en RDC notamment l'entreprise générale du cobalt ou le service du ministère des Mines qui s'occupe de l'artisanat minier, pour essayer de retirer une partie de tous ceux qui sont dans l'artisanat mais qui n'ont pas la formation nécessaire pour y travailler d'une manière sécurisée. Because we need safety in the artisanal mining. Et au-delà de la sécurité, on veut qu'il y ait de la valeur ajoutée. Et donc, ça, c'est une difficulté. Mais par rapport à l'adhésion des jeunes filles ou des jeunes femmes dans les filières techniques ou dans les filières de la technologie, il est très, très, très utile de commencer how can I say this? À appeler à la vocation, à les motiver à aimer les sciences, les mathématiques, les sciences, ce qui va faire que elles peuvent facilement aller vers ces études techniques. Pour l'instant, les proportions sont telles que pour une promotion de 100 étudiants, il y a 80 garçons et il y a 20 filles. Mais c'est parce que la vocation n'est née pas quand on est déjà au niveau de l'université. Donc, il faut commencer à faire aimer les matières scientifiques, les matières d'ingénieurs aux jeunes filles pendant qu'elles sont encore à l'école primaire, à l'école secondaire, ce qui va amener des cohortes, des jeunes filles à des universités. Mais le secteur artisanal, il doit être, comme on va dire, assez formalisé pour y amener réellement, non pas des gens qui ne comprennent pas comment on va faire de l'artisanat minier, mais qui puissent avoir aussi une formation calée. Voilà ce que je peux dire à ce niveau-là.
Thank you so much, Dr. Professor Jean-Marie. Yes, I think in a similar line, I think you're trying to say, please match the supply where the demand is. So if those who are found in the informal sector are earning less and they're not really getting the value, it's about shifting and incentivizing those actors into a more high skill, so into sciences, so they can get into the higher value. Thank you so much for that. So Professor Jean-Marie, we're going to leave you for now for a second. We'll bring you back when we go to do the question and answer segment after the panel. So thank you so much for that participation. I would like to bring in Chema Triki. So Chema Triki is the managing director of Growth Teams, and potentially she can tell you exactly what Growth Team does. But it's a very interesting and exciting organization, what they do. So Chema, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll ask you just two questions, and this is regarding around industrialization strategies around critical minerals and green industrialization. So the first question I'd like to ask you, Chema, would be, many countries in Africa promote value addition, yet employment gains remain very limited. So which industrial policy tools are proven to be the most effective in ensuring that green mineral value addition translates into decent jobs, particularly for women and youth, and also not just for exports, but for value addition and work and seeing that in the economy? Welcome, Chema.
Thank you, Veronica, and thanks. And hi, everyone. So my name is Chema Triki, not Tricky, but that's just a matter of pronunciation. I'm Managing Director of Growth Teams. We are a government advisory not-for-profit, and we focus to relate to a number of points that were made in the introduction. We focus on supporting government deliver growth strategies, not only identify the right instruments and the right approach, the right sectors and the right interventions in these sectors, but really engage in industrial policy as a process, because that's what industrialization is about. It's not about tools that we identify before action and that are static in time. It's really a dynamic and really a learning process, and that's how countries and firms learn, is through the learning by doing. And so our support focuses on enabling that process and on supporting it rather than on outsourcing, basically substituting for government capabilities. That's in a nutshell about us, but happy to say more about it if there are any questions. But to answer your question more specifically, I think there is a need to put in the job creation under a broader objective, which is industrialization and economic transformation. And when we talk about industrialization, what we mean industrialization is not only through manufacturing. I know industry sounds like only manufacturing, but it's more broadly the structural change that needs to happen in an economy, and in our case, in 54 economies on the continent. What we mean by economic transformation, at least there are two sub-objectives, at least these two. One is about productivity gains, and so technology adoption and technology upgrading, and more broadly building industrial capabilities, firms that can engage into improving the processes of production, into creating jobs as a byproduct of that, and then the job creation. For policymakers in Africa, because of our demographic growth that the continent is witnessing, we tend to focus way more on the job creation aspect because there is a social pressure to it. The challenge in disconnecting job creation from the industrialization perspective is that we do gap filling and we focus on the wrong segment that are job intensive. One of the most famous one is public work, public construction and public government projects, in government projects, or artisanal mining. And these are, of course, segments that can employ a lot of people, but that do not enable our youth to accumulate human capital, to understand technologies, to upgrade those technologies, and to more sort of engage in a professional path that not only at an individual level, but also at an organizational level allows us to move up a complexity ladder, and as a consequence, the development ladder. So that's the first point I want to really highlight. And what that means, so if we look into critical minerals specifically, when we look into the value chains, and a lot of the points that I'm going to make have been highlighted by Marit already, when we look into the value chains, we need to recognize that there is, unfortunately, through the structure of these value chains, there is a trade-off between the steps that can allow productivity gains or that have the highest value addition, and then the steps in the value chain that have the highest job creation potential. And they tend to be in almost all manufacturing sectors, they tend to be different steps. Where the job creation happens, the activities that are most labor intensive tend to be downstream and tend to be starting from assembly. And that's why actually it's not a coincidence that most of developing countries, either the ones that have been successful in transforming economically, or those that have been successful in developing certain sectors at high scale, like for instance, we can take the automotive in Morocco as an example. It's the most sort of prominent one on the continent recently. All these countries have started by entering assembly. Some of them have sort of pursued what we can call strategic bets, meaning, for instance, South Korea through the shipbuilding or the metal steel industry. Those were strategic bets. But ultimately, most of countries in the last 20, 30 years that have witnessed some level of success have started by the assembly. Okay, what does that tell us? Is that if we keep the job creation as the main focus and the main objective, we would need to look more broadly than just value addition. We need to look into what we can call, and what the literature calls, value capture. So it's starting where we can on the value chain, and then which can enable a learning by doing process, which can enable entrepreneurs and firms to identify new opportunities and then diversify and then move up in the complexity ladder. But that doesn't mean that we should not look into value addition. I would rather say the critical minerals and the green transition opportunities is a double sort of double opportunity. One, to create jobs downstream, and another to add value upstream, right? To enter the processing, we should not export raw material. At least you should enter the refining step, right? That is not extremely, depending on the critical minerals, some critical minerals are more difficult than others, but at least that step needs to be entered. Then we need to assess for each step, whether it's the precursor, whether it's the anode creation, production, the cathode production, etc., which step is feasible and under which conditions. And the reality is that the more we're going to go midstream towards basically cell production, we're going to have more requirements in terms of volume, in terms of economies of scale, and more requirements in terms of capital intensity, and then in terms of technology. And I would argue that the heart of industrial policy is technology, and is about the whole geopolitics now between China and the US, and it's a consequence on the global environment, is around who is going to lead in technologies for in the future. And currently China is on the way to be the leader, right? So fundamentally, it's not only about job creation, it's really about the technology and the capabilities that we build. And unfortunately, there is a trade-off. The step that you're going to focus on is going to either be fulfill one objective or the other. Let me stop here and happy to continue the conversation afterwards.
Thank you so much, Chema. That was actually it was very insightful to hear that depending how you target your goal, if it's job creation, then it might be a bit of a trade-off compared to having value addition. I think that's something to really take in for discussion. So I have a question for you that sort of moves in more into the implementation and practice. So region of integration is a central part of the African Green Mineral Strategy, as well as the AFCTA. So if we were to let's say we're going to go for the value addition goal instead of the job creation, how can African countries move from sort of fragmented national policies to more coordinated regional specialization, maybe through mineral corridors, special economic zones, shared infrastructure, without triggering a race to the bottom or when neighboring countries compete for investment? How can this be balanced out in terms of implementation?
Thanks, Veronica. The key point, which again Marit alluded to, the key point is recognizing what is the, well, first of all, is seeing the AFCFTA not only as a trade tool. It's not only about trade integration, because actually the AFCFTA in its current format, it's okay, we reduce tariffs or we cut tariffs in many sectors and we allow goods to move within the government, within the frontiers of African countries. But then it doesn't look at, as it is today, we're not looking at what are we trading, right? We're trading what? We're trading the products that each country is producing, which tend to be, as we know, products that do not have high complexity, that are not technologically intensive, that do not basically, we're trading raw materials, right? I mean, I'm just making a bit paraphrasing to make a point. So we need to focus on what we trade. What are the products that we trade? And for that to happen, we need to see the AFCFTA not as a trade integration project only, but it's also as a development project. And what that means, if we look at the AFCFTA as a development project, there is no other way than looking into developing regional value chains. For at least the regional value chains, both on the production side, so both on the supply side and then on the demand side. So on the demand side, it's quite straightforward, right? The rationale is that if you integrate you aggregate all the demands, especially in markets that are mostly shallow on the continent. Many countries have numerous population, but the population number of people does not equate to purchasing power and does not equate to volume of markets, right? We know that because, for instance, in another sector outside of green minerals, the textiles and apparel, most of our populations from the north, I come from Tunisia, from Tunisia to South Africa is different, but from Tunisia to other countries, from North Africa to East Africa, West Africa, we consume secondhand market, right? We call it friperie in Tunisia. Everyone goes to, from the doctors to the poor class, because of purchasing power, because actually we do not have the purchasing power to be able to consume new products, at least as they are marketed today. Okay, what does that mean? That means that the demand, so on the demand side, we can aggregate the demand, but that doesn't necessarily for some sectors, it might create the level of demand that we can allow for productive investment to happen, for basically scaled investment that requires billions of. If we're talking, for instance, of cells production, it's billions of investment. We're talking about gigafactories that require at least 1 billion, like fertilizers, like a number of other products as well. The aggregation of demand is one that can help basically create, as I said, a rationale for investment on the supply side. But there is also value in looking into how we can regionalize the supply side. How can we create regional value chains in which, first of all, countries can specialize in different steps, because actually no country alone will be able to develop the whole value chain and to be vertically integrated. So instead of being confined in our national frontiers and try to do everything and be doomed to fail, we actually imagine those frontiers as being non-existent from a production perspective, and having a regionally integrated value chain where firms can specialize in different steps according to the competitive advantage of their country and what they have to offer. And this would allow as well small countries that virtually would have not participated in would have not been able to enter these value chains, to participate, sometimes in low value addition activities, but that's already better than nothing, right? So that's the rationale, which I think Marit, as I said, alluded to, that we need to think about. And in the case of specifically critical minerals, how to develop these regional value chains. We should not look at them just from a conceptual perspective. I think there is a fundamentally a practicality point that we need to integrate, which can be reached by piloting initiatives, but piloting initiatives in partnership with the private sector. They should not be initiatives coming from bureaucrats, and all my respect to bureaucrats, I work with bureaucrats on a daily basis. But the reality is that if you want big projects to function, especially at a regional level, they need to be driven by a market approach. They need to be driven commercially. They need to make sense commercially. They need to identify the off-takers. They need to have already been some hypothesis being tested and validated. And then pilot that initiative, and a success of one initiative would crowd in other initiatives. But we should not see it from a top-down approach of making big statement of tomorrow we're gonna develop regional value chains across Africa, because no one is gonna. We're gonna feel happy and we're gonna feel good about ourselves having said that, but that's not gonna translate in real term and in real life. And the role of piloting initiatives is also to not only to, as I said, show success, but ultimately it's about trust. And we should not underestimate how much trust is a commodity in every economy. That's a fundamental commodity that unfortunately we do not have yet, not nationally between private sectors and governments, and even not regionally. It becomes a political speech without anything concrete. So we need to anchor it in things that can be piloted. And I can give one example. I know I'm talking a lot, so I'll make it brief. I think what I see as really exciting as an initiative, as a sort of entry point or something to pilot, beyond the cells manufacturing, the battery cell manufacturing, because that's, in the short term, it's really, really hard to get through. But what we see, at least in a region that I worked on a lot, East Africa, the mobility, the green mobility is booming. The uptake of 2-3-wheelers, of electric 2-3-wheelers, is the fastest growing product basically being consumed in East Africa by far in terms of mobility, more than 4-wheelers, more than commercial cars, more than any other type of mobility products. So what does that mean? For one reason is that actually from a consumer perspective, the operating costs are 30 to 40% less expensive than fuel-based solutions, right? So if you as a consumer, you're a daily worker and you have a tuk-tuk that you run from one place to another for last mile delivery or whatever, you going electric with your tuk-tuk would cost you 30 to 40% less than using gas or oil. So what that means is that the consumer, the market is there, right? You don't need to convince consumers. But, and there is an opportunity actually, that fleet of two, three-wheelers that is being created, to think about how can we harmonize, provide standards to what we are importing, to the products that we are importing, because for now, many countries are importing, and I'm gonna be real, rubbish products from India and China. And that because we don't have yet standards in each country, but also across countries to which type of products we want to receive. And then by harmonizing the standards, you can create the market scale, you can leverage the market scale, and then potentially you can think about entering the assembly, and not only assembly of the products of the tuk-tuk or two, three-wheelers, but the assembly of batteries. An assembly of batteries, the pack production is a step that is absolutely feasible technologically. Actually, in Tanzania, it's already happening, and a number of other countries, but it's happening at very small scale. Each person is trying. There is an engineer, it starts like an engineer, Tanzanian engineer who studied in Sweden, came back to Tanzania and started a small shop to do these type of assemblies, even for four-wheelers. But it's not industrial scale. That's irrelevant for industrialization. But actually, that shows you that there are some pockets of possibilities that you can build on. So one is identify the right, the two, three-wheelers, or let me put, identify the right product, leverage the market scale of these products, and then enter the steps that are feasible for these products. And in this case, I think two, three-wheelers and assembly of battery would create a lot of jobs, are feasible technologically. And then assembly of a battery, what's exciting about it is that it has linkages to electrical not engineering, it's not necessarily super intensive in skills, but at least it creates linkages with the electrical industry. And then, you know, the learning by doing would do miracles, entre guillemets, comme on dit, in its own way. Let me stop there.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. No, there's a lot of lessons there that I could try to insight. But very, very, very insightful. I think just quickly, just to summarize, it's good to try and think about piloting, which then can be used as a example to build relationships, and then thinking about scale and implementation. And two really good opportunities for most African countries are in the e-mobile and the battery, where we've already seen some examples of very successful mini entrepreneurs, again, looking at the market. But that's my summary, but I've done lack of a job. I think that was very fantastic, Chema. Thank you so much. So I'll pause you as well. I'll bring you back in the Q&A. I'd like to bring in Mr. Tabi Tabi, our last panelist that we asked the questions. Mr. Tabi Tabi is an entrepreneur, and he's the founder of Gravile Energy. Hopefully I said that correctly. And that's a private sector looking at clean energy and minerals. Mr. Tabi, welcome. So I just have two questions for you, and if it's okay, I'll give you 2 minutes to answer them, just because we want to be able to get the audience in and discuss some of these things. So first question, from an entrepreneur's perspective, what are the key conditions, including policies, infrastructure, skills, finance, that make local processing, manufacturing, or recycling of green minerals more commercially viable in Africa, from your experience?
Thank you very much, Veronica. The company is called Granville Energy, and it's part
Granville Energy.
Yeah, Granville, yeah, and it's part of a bigger company called Granville Industries. And the name Granville was actually selected when we founded the companies to commemorate and celebrate Black excellence, and also to highlight the fact that we as Africans have been involved in invention and also contribution to modern technology and engineering for many years. So most people don't know who Granville is, but they know who Tesla is. So that's why we actually intentionally named the company after Granville T. Woods. So that's just my 2 cents about the company. To get to your question, what we need as entrepreneur, from an entrepreneur perspective, to make local value addition investable or bankable, I'll answer that by first of all painting a quick picture. Let's go in to the future about 10, 20 years from today. The whole world needs what we have in Africa, all the critical or green minerals. But we don't have the people who can add value on the continent. Every other major market in the world have developed and advanced to the point where They can develop robots to come out here from drones or aviation technology to be able to scan our species, understand the minerals we have, be very specific, clinically specific about where to identify or find the minerals that they want in DRC, in Gabon, in Chad, and they can move humanoids, not humans, they can move humanoids. Let's assume by then we have 2 billion people, 60% of them being youth or unemployed. But we don't have the capacity or capability to actually transform these minerals to value add that we can sell to other countries at a higher price. And so players can bring humanoids to extract those resources from the earth, process them and take them out. What would the future of Africa look like? So that is what we look at as entrepreneurs. And for us to start looking at solutions and to make it bankable, we need a couple of things. I want to highlight 4 critical points. Number 1, we need policies. Number 2, obviously, we need the right infrastructure. And infrastructure go beyond road and rail and aviation. We need also logistics as part of infrastructure. We also, at the same time, need to look at financing to de-risk, some of the projects we have on the continent, possible or potential projects. And lastly, like Marit and Chema and the other speakers already alluded, we need the right skill set. And skill set do not only indicate STEM-related skills like science, engineering, technology, and all of that. We need more than that. If we need logistics engineers or technicians, we need planners that go beyond just science people. What I'd like to highlight here in terms of our stable infrastructure, because it's very critical. We can get resources out of DRC, but we need to get them to port because DRC does not have sufficient port. That's where Angola and DRC come in partnership to be able to move those resources. But also, what about processing the resources instead of taking the core out of the earth and shipping them to the US or to China? What about processing them in DRC or between DRC and Angola, right? And also maybe even Zambia. So that is where we need to look at different policies that will create predictability in the industry so that investors will have confidence to be able to invest. But also, let's be clear, when we talk about investors, I'm not talking about Europeans or Chinese or American investors. I'm also talking about African investors because the current age, we do have African investors and businesses and banks and institutions who have the funds available to invest in Africa. So let's be clear about that. We also need to have African investors. We need to make the environment conducive for them. In terms of infrastructure, still talking about the policies, we also need to look at regionalization. We need to look at regional blocks. So our policy should not just be specific to one country. As the other speakers have already indicated, going it alone, we will not succeed. We have many cross-border relationships that we need to leverage, we need to amplify, and we need to bring them into the policy framework so that we can take advantage. If we look at Eastern DRC, the war we have today in Eastern DRC is simply because one side of the border has enormous amount of resources that the rest of the world needs, and they'll destabilize the country. At the same time, we do have families across both sides of the borders, right? From north all the way to the south. If we could have these ethnic relationships that have gone for thousands of years with no problems, why can't we leverage those on the side of policy framework to ensure that we can make it easier for entrepreneurs to be able to conduct business, without any disruption. So excuse me. Yeah, sorry about that. Just had interruption here. And then on the side of infrastructure, equally, we need to consider cross-border infrastructure. We need to have access to energy. If one country has an enormous amount of resources on the energy space, like DRC has capacity on Inga Dam, then we should develop it as a regional project to enable and facilitate access to affordable electricity. Because without affordable electricity, there is no beneficiation that will happen at the scale at which we need to compete globally. I also like to highlight logistics, very important. A typical use case, imagine shipping equipment to Burundi right now, or somewhere in Kenya, or Uganda, for instance. The cost of getting equipment across any of these places actually doubles the cost of the technology or the service. So if we can sort out the regional logistics challenges we have on the continent, obviously it will make a lot of projects investable. Skills very important. But skills, we keep talking about skills as if it's only specific to the green industry or battery or solar industry where we participate. But we need to also understand that we have cross-industry skills. For instance, boiler makers might be very useful in the renewable energy industry, but at the same time can contribute to the construction industry. So both policies as well as skills must be considered on a larger scale. And then banking and financing to fund those initiatives. We need to find a way to encourage African investors to always lead this project. It is always difficult for an entrepreneur, African entrepreneur, to leave the continent, go somewhere to try and explain an opportunity to people who lack the context, right? It makes it very difficult and obviously increase the cost of transaction. I think I don't want to go beyond that. I mean, I have a lot more to say, but I'll rather leave that for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, I think you highlighted a lot of the key bottlenecks to the challenges in as an entrepreneur. So just focusing on the African youth entrepreneur, what practical skills or partnerships or market access reforms are the most critical to enable an African entrepreneur or even, let's say, entrepreneur who's also an investor to scale green minerals and clean energy business regionally or and then also under the AFCTA. And so just before you answer, I just want to tell everyone we'll probably extend this till 2:40. So in case you 2:45, so in case you can stay a bit longer, that'd be perfect. But also if you have to leave, then that's fine. But we'd love for you to stay to get to engage in the Q&A after this engagement. So yes, Mr. Tabi, what would be the practical skills and partnerships, market access, reforms that would be critical for the youth entrepreneur in Africa? Hello? Sorry, Mr. Tabi, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, I was just yapping along. I was saying that, I mean, this is a very interesting question you raised and a very important one. For us to succeed in this space and to scale, we need to be multi-skilled or multi-talented, or we need to have multiple dimensions. So if I have engineering skills, it's not good enough. I need to be able to have more than just basic financial engineering skills. Why? Because at some point, I might not have the capacity to employ somebody to do financial engineering for me. I might have to do the financial modeling on my own. We need to have digital fluency, right? So I need to be able to use digital tools as an entrepreneur. Basically, at the point where an entrepreneur is scaling the business, you need to rely on yourself on a very small team set of people. You don't need 100 people to scale out a billion-dollar company, but we need to be able to learn. And I think the most critical skills that we need to have as entrepreneurs is the ability to learn and to learn very fast, because we will be presented with multiple challenges regularly. The only way an entrepreneur can scale the business in this space is to be able to learn the new technologies and new things that are coming up every day, including legal frameworks and regulatory policies frameworks as well. And then, yeah, I think I mentioned the skills, and then you ask about a strategic partnership. What is important is to realize that for most countries, most economies, there's always been a partnership between the established companies, industries, and new players and new entrants, right? Silicon Valley is what it is today because the US government had to enact a policy for large tech companies who had government contracts with the military to support startup companies, minority-owned businesses. In Africa, we need to do that. So for instance, if I'm coming into Uganda to start up a company or going to Ethiopia to start up a company, if I'm a much bigger player, I need to include as part of the ethos of my business as an entrepreneur to support local businesses. Number one, I don't have to employ everybody, but I can create employment through partnership with smaller businesses. It goes the other way around as well. I think government should actually make that a policy, not just enforce local content, but also to encourage local participation.
No, yeah, completely agreed on the partnership between two businesses, large scale. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for the insightful response. So I would love for us to move to the question and answer segment of this webinar. And we have had, I think, 11 questions on the Q&A tab, but I think there are a bit more. So I'm gonna I'm going to select, so sorry in advance for those who we might miss, but I'm just going to select a few questions and maybe just sort of round up some that are similar. So I think the first question I'd like to ask would be this question says, at the moment, the dynamic of youth activities in most countries in Africa goes towards leaving the continent for the opportunities in order to advance in USA, UK, Canada, Australia. Is this program looking to change orientation, so the youth towards more developing countries themselves, or just stay in the continent? And how would the youth be made more aware of the potential opportunities of critical minerals? So this question goes to anyone, I think, because it's more generically about how youth are being mobilized. Do you think that there should be that strategy? So I think anyone who would like to take tab of that question, just raise your hand, please.
I would love to reflect on that.
Go on.
Have been one of those Africans who got a scholarship and went to study in Europe when I was young. I think there is we cannot retain people from aspiring to better. We need to focus on that. I don't think we should focus on how to retain them, but rather on how to orient them towards programs and towards countries and programs within these countries that then would benefit to Africa. The role of diaspora is a central piece in economic transformation. And actually, the story of Taiwan would have not been the same without its diaspora. It all started, all the ships industry that we hear about now, the semiconductors, and that's actually a huge geopolitical asset for Taiwan today. It all started with with a couple of engineers, Taiwanese, one who are working in the Silicon Valley and in big multinational firms in the US, who then came back and created a network of people around them and knew what to do, and things started that way. So we should not underestimate that. We should, rather than focus on young people, how to retain young people, we should rather create programs where they could go, I would argue, instead of going to Europe now, I would actually, if I had to advise my own country, Tunisia, where we have like a scholarship program in partnership with France and Germany, I would actually change it to partnership with China, with other Asian countries with Japan, with South Korea, in countries where actually the labor market is not shaped only by services, is only shaped by industries and manufacturing. Because the reality is not only of the skills that you develop, is your know-how that you develop once you start working, the networks that you create with that. And I think one problem that we have in the African diaspora is that we study mostly in US and Europe, and then most of them are in finance, in consulting, in the Bermuda Triangle of talent, as they call it, finance, consulting, and IT. Those are services that actually do not hold the technologies for industrialization, and in the case of critical minerals, in the chemistry, in the chemical industry, and to produce batteries and all of that. So I would really strategically think of it as partnership with countries that have those capabilities for people to go study there, to enter, to have an experience in firms who are manufacturing there, and then bring them back in Africa to build capabilities, because they would bring know-how and networks that are extremely valuable.
Fantastic. Yes, you can't avoid the learning from others to industrialize. So I completely agree. There's another question I think it might be for you, Chema. So this is relating to political economy aspect of the mining industry and improving value chains and youth employment. The demand for critical minerals is mostly from the advanced economies, and Africa often has to negotiate for access for those minerals. What are your thoughts on Africa leveraging investment for access deals to improve value chains by negotiating a package of conditions such as building refineries, smelters, improving regional transport networks to ports, whatever, and employment through technology transfers? It's basically leveraging this to try and ensure that they get a deal, as well as STEM education programs. And and this is important as a component of transformative industrial policy in Africa.
Excellent question. Excellent question, because actually it raises the point of, if you want of power of negotiation. If you want to negotiate, you need to have some arguments and you need to have some power. And the reality is that every country negotiating by itself on the critical minerals does not have enough market power to shape the direction and to really hold a sort of strong position in that negotiation. So, of course, the only country maybe that can be an outlier to that assessment is DRC because of the 70% of cobalt that the country holds. But if we take the case of Indonesia and the nickel value chain in Indonesia, which has become famous because they actually introduced export bans of raw material, of nickel raw export, and had some success in processing, at least the first years of processing. They leveraged their market power, which is having almost half of the world reserves of nickel in Indonesia. The reality of our own reserves, is again, beyond DRC, is that each one, Tanzania has the 5th largest reserves in graphite, Zambia has copper, etc. But alone, each country thinks with nationally, and if you compare to other African countries, it's huge resources. But if you take it at a global scale, it becomes very small. But by aggregating, by basically negotiating as one, by not talking as only Tanzania or Zambia, but rather by talking on behalf of all countries that hold critical minerals, suddenly our market power increases. And what that means is that we would have higher negotiation power with the Chinese, with whoever. By the way, we should be agnostic of who we negotiate with. I think there is also debate about should we look now for Europe or should we look for China? We should look for anyone who has technology and who is able to invest in the continent under our conditions. That's the framing. If it's Chinese, welcome. If it's French, welcome. Whoever it is, it doesn't matter where people come from. But then also, for that to happen, we come back to the regional value chains, right? And we come back to regional initiatives. It is not a dubby sort of for people to make feel good because we're brothers and sisters. No, it's a market. It's a market and development imperative. If we are serious about really seizing the opportunities in critical minerals, we need to act collectively. And for that to happen, we need to be really careful about how do we approach these negotiations. Another point I wanted to make around these negotiations is that we also need to look at the universe of possibilities. It is not only if you have a critical mineral deal, you should not leverage that just to negotiate processing and value addition. You can actually leverage it to have investment in other industries that are the backbone of industrialization. If we look into the product space, which is basically a tentative to map out all the products that are exported and how they relate to each other with which type of capabilities, we know that machinery, electronics, chemicals are the backbone of manufacturing and the backbone of industrialization. Instead of focusing only on negotiating deal for value addition in critical minerals, I should also leverage that to negotiate investment in these backbone industries that have huge number linkages with other manufacturing industries, and that would enable us to have basically spillover and multiplier effects in industries more broadly.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for Dr. Kunda. So this question says, specifically for the center, how to address the financing challenges for the African Center for Research on Batteries. So I'm not just bringing Dr. Kunda in case you understand that question. Is it challenges for the center itself, or is it the challenges for the battery value chain? But the question says, how can we address these challenges, the financial challenges for the African Center for Research on Batteries? I'll just bring you in case you understand that, like you have a response to that question. Is he still here? No, I don't think he is. Okay. Okay, so we'll go on to the next question. So there's a question in regards to just give me a second. So there's a questions around skills, and this question is more broad towards something that we will work towards in the ADIF, but also I'd like to bring it to the panelists, and again, whoever wants to answer this. While skill development is an issue, there is an unemployment paradox in Africa. There are university graduates all over Africa with many advanced degrees obtained in international universities with no employment opportunities. How do we solve this paradox as well in terms of the context of the critical minerals value addition?
I think I would like to take that one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is actually a very important topic and point to raise. We need to go back and look at the education system, the framework we've adopted in Africa, and ask ourselves who this system actually serves and who it has served over the past 70 years. The fact is, it hasn't served us because they were designed to ensure that we cap the kind of skills, the kind of work we can do, mostly to become administrators or to become typically consultants. And with that, we are not able to create the capacity we need. If we take Germany, for instance, where there's a huge emphasis on kind of equivalent of TVET university colleges, they have the same level of respect. In the African context, if you go to a general education school, you do the A-level system like in Zimbabwe or in Cameroon or in Nigeria or in Ghana, people seem to be more respected and put more emphasis on that. The intelligent kids will go to general education school, right? And the ones who are considered to be slow in quotes will be sent to technical colleges. So basically, you are a failure. So by design, we've already labeled certain education system as bad and unproductive. Whereas those are the skill set we need to actually develop entrepreneurs, but also to develop the economy. How do we build manufacturing without machining and tooling skills? How do we create those tools that we need to build manufacturing plants, right? We spend millions of dollars to import, steel frames, from other countries. I don't want to name names, but steel frames that we can literally manufacture, right? You can have the mechanical engineer who can design those things, but you need the technician to cut the steels and the steel frames, to have the CNC machining skills and the additive manufacturing skills. So we need to go back to the drawing board and basically ask ourselves the fundamental question: what do we need as a continent? What do we need as a people? Therefore, what kind of education system do we need and how do we create emphasis? Also, African companies should get involved in curriculum design. I have been involved with some of the universities in South Africa where I sit on the curriculum advisory board, and we have an intake program which we've been running for about 12 years through universities. And we have first-hand experience to see, to understand that most of the graduates are not prepared for real life environment. Even those who study computer science and engineering, right? We still need to invest at least 5 years of skills development to get them to the point where they can be independent. If I compare that to my staff members in Asia, a 28-year-old in China, for instance, will outperform somebody working in Africa for 10 years. And it's because of the education system. I think that's what we need to do. We need to have that realignment and start by redesigning curriculum, but also those who are in the pipeline, we need to change in mid-flight so we can ensure that we can use them immediately. Thank you.
No, fantastic. Yes, definitely redefine the skills and curriculum to ensure that it matches our demand instead of using the old ones. So thank you so much. There were a lot of questions and really great comments and suggestions, both in the Q&A and the comment section. So we will take all of that in. So just to let you know, this is the first part series of the entire African Development Impact Forum engagement. It's a 3-stage engagement. So we expect to have 4 or 5 more webinars coming up, starting from February up until May. And you'll get information about that on the UNECA and the EDAP website. And then we'll let you know as well if once the ADIF website comes on, that tells you more about ADIF, the platform. So looking forward to seeing most of you in the next webinar, and then also looking forward to also having you engaging in the actual forum itself. And the aim of the forum really is to take all of these discussions we've had today, both the really amazing solutions and insightful discussions, into more of a practical implementation gap discussion. So if we were to have all these policies, all the solutions in place, what will we do as stakeholders in Africa? So really, thank you for engaging. So I'd like to bring back Director Karima and Cosmas for closing up the forum. the webinar, sorry. So can I bring in Dr. Karima, I think it's next. And yeah, just want to thank you all for engaging. It's been super amazing discussions and really enjoyed this engagement with you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Veronica. First of all, warmest thanks to our panelists, to Marit for having introduced the issue, and Professor Kanda, Madame Triki, and Mr. Tabi for very interesting and enlightening presentation and answers to the question you have raised. What is interesting is that we have moved actually from, I would say, politically correct position to recommendations and ideas that will help us really shape the discussion around ADIF in a way that will bring change. And it is exactly what we wanted to do with this first webinar, moving from just, traditional ideas to something that will lead us to decisions and programs that will create jobs in a way that will make a difference in eventually people's life. So let me just start from the title of the webinar, and it's three elements: the critical minerals, youth employment, and the regional value chains. And we have seen through the discussion and even the reaction in the chat that we cannot tackle these issues, in a separate manner. They have to be looked at in a more coordinated manner if we really want to make impact and lead to transformation. So I will not summarize what has been said. We had excellent contribution, and all these will be captured in the summary of what has been said. But I wanted maybe to bring one main takeaway that for me is very important. And this is linked to the subject of the seminar, but also to all what we will be doing through ADIF. And basically, the main takeaway is that we cannot continue working in silos. We need to have a holistic approach. When we mentioned, for example, skills development, skills are not technical skills. They are not only the soft skills that they integrate all the components. And when we look at skills and capacity development, we have to look at what our decision makers have to do to learn and to be better equipped actually to address those challenges, what the doers, whoever they are, the youth, the women, the private sector, what the doers have to gain in terms of knowledge and skills. And finally, and because we mentioned accountability, we didn't dwell a lot on it, but I think that it is a very important element, what the evaluators of those activities need to have in terms of skills, because we cannot continue launching projects without bringing accountability, governance, etc. So this is for the skills package, if I may say so. And this means that all the actors have to consider these issues in a very agile and adaptable manner. We cannot continue with traditional academic curricula that would put more focus and emphasis on numbers. We have trained 1,000 people without looking at what jobs these people will have at the end of the day. So it is very important to look at all these aspects together. When we look at critical minerals, we should not look at them only, and I hear this, I think it is a very interesting idea, not only from the value addition perspective, not only from the what they can bring to a single country, but from a regional and integration perspective, and also from a global negotiation capacity of our continent vis-à-vis the rest of the world. Actually, we are not doing it only within Africa, we are doing it in Africa in relation to the rest of the world. And I think that this is a very important element that has come up of the discussion. We have mentioned AFCFTA as an environment also that would be conducive to to accelerate the process and to give more opportunities, both in terms of industrial development, in terms of cooperation, in terms of integration, and in terms of training and job creation. So there were a lot of ideas. I cannot capture all of them. There were very important elements that we will be building on. Just to mention that we at IDEP, as a capacity development institution, more and more over the last years, we have been looking at what would make Africa more successful and what would be the skills and the capacity that are needed for Africa to gain and to further thrive. And this is at all levels. And as I said earlier, it is at the level of skills and technical aspects, but also at the level of decision makers. And we are doing it in the context of what we call an integrated capacity development program. And we are working with governments and training institutions so that the planning processes are more inclusive and more agile. We have worked on risk management, for example, and more relevant to address needs, current ones, but also long-term perspective, since we have also launched a foresight program with all potential actors. So all this actually is very much linked to what our brilliant panelists said in terms of how we should approach this matter. We should not be short-sighted, but we should also look at our development perspectives and opportunities for the longer term, trying to have a more coordinated approach to our development and bringing around the table all those who could have a say in this process. So, Veronica, this is a very, very brief summary of all what has been said. We will definitely use them as the coordinating institution for ADIF. And again, as I said, we have learned things that are specific to the issues that we addressed today, but that could also be lessons for the other sectors. I mean, we will talk about technology, we will talk about many other agriculture development, etc. And a number of recommendations that were made today could be very helpful. And we will look at them from an institutional perspective to see how our capacity development program, especially in the context of our strategic framework that will start this year up to 2030, how our strategic capacity development framework will gain from the ideas and will help us assist our countries actually better design, implement, and evaluate their development programs. Thank you very much to all of you. Merci à tous pour la participation et la contribution. Over to you, Veronica.
Thank you so much, Director Karima. Fantastic summary. And yes, everything that we've said about how this is going to inform both the programming as well as ADIF. So really want to thank everyone for attending and for all your contributions and questions. We really appreciate. The next ADIF webinar will be in February. We'll let you know the dates very soon. And we'll be looking at the impact of technology and AI on employment. So it'll be a very interesting discussion. Just wanted to check whether Marit also wanted to come in and say a few words as closing. But for those who are leaving, just wanted to say thank you so much for this engagement.
No, thank you so much, Veronica. I just wanted to say thank you for all the speakers. I want to say Prof. Marie Kanda, who was in Riyadh, Tabi Tabi, and Chema, again, for your, as usual, for your insightful insights. And also to all participants who from all over Africa. I'm so happy to see all of them here, and we'll continue the conversation. As Director Karima said, this is the beginning, and we'll have concrete. I saw some very specific questions to UNECA, which we'll take forward. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming, and yeah, goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye to all
Goodbye.
of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.